There are moments in history where human ingenuity wasn't optional. It was survival. During the Cold War, soldiers, scouts, and field engineers faced winters so brutal they could end a man's life in hours. In those frozen forests and silent plains, they were forced to invent shelters that didn't just protect, they concealed, insulated, and endured. Out there, in the white wastelands where storms erased footprints within minutes, the luxury of modern gear didn't exist. There were no ultralight tents, no reflective fabrics, no carbon fiber poles to rely on. All they had was knowledge, and whatever the land around them offered, and in that harsh classroom, they designed a shelter so simple, so quiet, and so brutally effective that it quietly outperformed much of the gear we praise today. Its legacy faded as modern equipment took over, but its brilliance never did. Today, we rebuild that forgotten design to uncover why it still defeats the cold, the wind, and the darkness better than many modern solutions. If you spend enough time studying Cold War shelters, there's a moment when they stop feeling like relics and start feeling like warnings. They reveal a level of survival intelligence that modern gear sometimes fails to match. These shelters weren't built for comfort. They were built to preserve life in brutal conditions. The more you explore the manuals and the accounts of reconnaissance units, the more you realize how carefully these designs were crafted. They were tested in forests, tundras, and snowfields where mistakes were punished instantly. These structures existed because survival left no room for error. Among all the creations of that era, one shelter stands apart as quietly legendary. It is almost shockingly simple on the outside, yet unbelievably efficient on the inside. What looks primitive at first glance becomes brilliant once you begin building it. At first, it appears to be nothing more than a low mound of snow or earth, blending into the environment. But as you start assembling it yourself, every inch reveals another layer of logic. Every angle, doorway, and thickness is deliberate. The roof slope is designed to shed snow like a natural avalanche barrier. The walls are thick because field tests proved their insulation power. Even the crawling entrance works like a heat trap that keeps warmth locked inside. As you build, you begin to understand how every detail contributes to survival. This isn't just a shelter, it's an engineered microenvironment. It's a pocket of stability carved out of a landscape trying to freeze you. Modern tents depend on thin fabrics and lightweight poles to survive storms. This shelter depends on the mass of nature itself. Snow, branches, and soil become part of the structure, turning it into a living fortress against the cold. When storms rage, modern tents tremble, flap, and strain under pressure. This shelter reacts with complete indifference. Wind flows over it, snow piles upon it, and the structure only becomes stronger. Inside, the silence is almost unreal. There is no fabric snapping, no metal rattling, only stillness. That silence was priceless for recon teams who needed to remain undetected. Thermally, this shelter behaves like a natural furnace. A single person can warm the interior dramatically because the thick insulation traps heat efficiently. The temperature difference between inside and outside often feels impossible. Cold War reports described frost melting from the inner roof, even while blizzards attacked the exterior. This wasn't magic, it was physics executed perfectly. The shelter simply minimizes heat loss in every possible way. Because the structure sits low, wind cannot grip it or tear it apart. It becomes part of the terrain rather than an object fighting the elements. This simplicity is its strength. Stealth is a built-in advantage, not an added feature. Covered in snow or earth, the shelter disappears into the landscape. Aerial scouts often missed it entirely during Cold War exercises. Even thermal imaging struggled to detect it because its mass-diffused heat signatures. For teams that relied on invisibility, this shelter wasn't just useful, it was essential. It protected them as much as it hid them. Defensively, the structure outperforms most modern tents without even trying. Its mass slows debris and impact hazards far better than thin fabrics ever could. The angled entrance prevents sudden intrusion, giving occupants time to react. Inside, the darkness prevents silhouettes from giving away your position. Light doesn't leak. Shadows don't move. It is a sanctuary engineered by necessity, not luxury. Once you rebuild this shelter yourself, you realize how advanced it truly is. It wasn't invented in laboratories, but refined by soldiers and survival instructors facing real danger. Every improvement came from experience, hardship, and adaptation. It wasn't made to be pretty or fashionable. It was made to keep people alive during nights that could kill. And that honesty in design is what makes it timeless. When the structure is finished, it becomes clear why survival schools still teach it quietly. It works even when modern equipment fails. It is proof that simple ideas, when perfected, can outperform expensive technology. This video rebuilds that forgotten Cold War shelter step by step. It shows how each layer contributes to warmth, camouflage, and structural strength. It reveals why this design deserves to be remembered. Because the Cold War didn't just create weapons and strategies, it created survival solutions forged in the harshest conditions imaginable. And this shelter remains one of the smartest, warmest, and most resilient designs ever built. In a world where gear gets lighter, fancier, and more expensive every year, it's easy to forget that the greatest survival tools have always come from simple principles and real experience. This shelter is proof that you, Dante, need titanium stakes or high-tech fabrics to stay alive. You need understanding, patience, and the willingness to use the world around you. The Cold War may be over, but the lessons it taught about endurance still matter. Out in the wild, the storm doesn't care how new your equipment is. The cold doesn't check the brand of your tent. Nature tests everything equally, and only designs born from necessity truly endure. So as you watch this shelter rise from branches, snow, and earth, remember this. Sometimes the old ways aren't outdated. They're perfected. And sometimes the most powerful survival secrets are the ones we left behind.